Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever in the world that you are joining me from. Welcome to another episode of The Heart of It. I'm your host, Andrea Thompson. Now, if you're just joining me here on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're listening in on any one of the streaming apps, welcome, welcome, welcome. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Leave a comment if you really like this video or if you have any topics that you'd love for me to explore right here on The Heart of It. Tonight's episode will be one that really hits home for me. This one I feel like is universal, even though I will be speaking more so in the context of how it impacts our Black community and specifically our Caribbean community living here in Canada. I grew up in Jamaica seeing literally everybody in my family smoke. My mother smoked, my sister smoked, my brother smoked, my uncle smoked. I just didn't smoke because it didn't resonate with me. I tried it. I tried weed before and I didn't love it. Now, before weed was actually legalized, we could actually just get weed easily like that. You could go on the corner and just buy a jar of weed, a 50 bag, a 100 bag, a 200 bag of weed, right? My Jamaicans know exactly what I'm talking about. So weed was pretty much very accessible growing up. I just decided that I was not going to indulge in weed. In our Jamaican and Caribbean culture, ganja has history. We call it purple skunk, sensimania, so many different names that we had for ganja. And it really has been normalized in our culture and has been accepted. We grew up, a lot of us, seeing our parents and grandparents indulging in weed. Some of us do it secretly. Some of us do it openly. Some of us think very little of people who actually do it because some people do it and we see them on the corner and we see them peering that weed with what we call in Jamaica a special. But most of us didn't grow up viewing weed as being dangerous. We viewed it as being natural. And that is why this conversation is so difficult to have. It's because culturally, a lot of us have accepted that weed is a way of life. The Rastafarians, they accept weed as a way of life and they use it in a very spiritual context. But the weed that is distributed and smoked in Jamaica is far different from the weed that is sold right here in Canada. And that is what I really want to talk about. Canada has one of the highest use rate for cannabis amongst young people in the entire world. Since it was legalized in 2018, weed-induced psychosis has actually tripled. But one of the big differences with the weed that we are used to in Jamaica and the weed that is sold here is that the THC levels are up to 5 times higher than what we would get in Jamaica. So what your uncle and your grandpa and everybody on the man them on the corner used to smoke is not what is being sold right here in these stores. This topic really hits home for me because last year my son came to me in panic mode, crying, saying, "Mom, I have something to tell you. I've been smoking." And to be honest with you, I would never have guessed that this young man was smoking. I did see signs in him that were different, but in my mind, in my little pea's brain, my son would never smoke because I don't smoke. And I was thinking that this could never hit home for me. But I did see some changes in him that I thought were spiritual. He was under a spiritual attack, is what I thought. But little did I know that this young man was actually going through psychosis because of weed. I'm no doctor, but I saw what cannabis did to my son. And that's why I think that this topic is so important for us to discuss. Because sometimes, as parents, we really do miss the signs. We're really not paying enough attention to our children. Or sometimes I won't be too hard on myself, but sometimes we miss the signs completely and think that what we're seeing is something else when this is what it was. We know that the brain isn't fully developed until about age 24, 25. So when you add the use of cannabis to that, it really does impact how they think. And if your child is actually predisposed to other mental illnesses, it actually triggers those and or make those worse. Research has also shown that some people who suffer from schizophrenia, some people who suffer from bipolar, if you are genetically predisposed to that, then cannabis can actually trigger those things in young people. Some people actually go into a psychosis and never return. So what happened in my house? What happened to my son last year? Last year, I thought that my son was under a spiritual attack. I thought that the demons were coming to get him because I'm a spiritual person and that's what I believe in. I know that there are always spiritual warfare. We're living in a spiritual world, is what I think, physical and spiritual. And so I believed him when he said that he was having a lot of sleep paralysis. And I believed him when he said that he saw a green man in his room. And I believed him when he said that, oh, there's something in the corner right there. There's something in the corner right there, mom. And he would call me out of my bed at nights and I would go and I would sleep with him and I would plead the blood of Jesus all over this house. And I would take the Bible and I would pray and I would hold him and I said, God, protect my son, just protect my son because God, don't let the enemy take my child. And I would see him in my dreams. And I thought that it was a spiritual attack and a spiritual attack only because I do believe that when you engage in certain activities, it opens the door for the devil to come in. And this is not for my non-believers, but for those who believe, you will get it. And so I ended up just praying and praying and praying. And I really thought that my son was going out of his mind because maybe somebody was doing something spiritual to him. Never ever did I think or thought that he was using cannabis, weed, ganja, whatever we call it these days. So I was praying for him and, battling this thing and worried about him as I went along the way. He started acting a particular way, very angry, very defensive. And I thought that that was what he was keeping from me. And if I'm going to be real honest with you in this segment, I would say that I was having some problems in my marriage that I thought that triggered his anger because my husband and I were constantly at it, constantly arguing. And I felt that I created an environment in which made him unsettled, made him angry, and made him, the way he was at the time. So I blamed it on what was happening between my husband and I. I had several conversations with him. My son and I are pretty close. We do really have an open relationship for the most part, right? Where we can talk about anything. I don't silence my children. And so I never expected him to ever come to me and say that, I couldn't tell you this because I've always set the tone for that in our relationship, or so I thought, right? So, he was going on with himself and being just super angry. And one of the things that I was scared of was to leave my daughter with him. That was how bad it was. He was so mad all the time. He would be shouting at her because I have a 5-year-old, right? At this time, he was 18. She was about 4. And I was like, I don't want to. There were moments when I said, I don't want to leave my daughter with him because he's just too angry. I don't know what he would actually do to her because of the anger that he was displaying. Do I need to get him some help? Try to get him some help. He just would not take the help. I went on about my day, went on about my life. He graduated high school. I was very proud of him. We managed to I've gotten him into college, with a conditional acceptance. And yes, he was on his way. He was on his way to college and I felt proud of that. And to be honest with you, parents who are watching this, my son doesn't have a lot of friends. My son doesn't go out a lot. My son doesn't do much. And so in my mind, I have a good boy and I still think he's a good son. But in my mind, I would never expect him to be doing anything. Certain things is just out of the realm of what I think my child would do, right? And so one day, one of the things I can tell you to look out for is for them to be very withdrawn. He was very withdrawn, acting very depressed, having suicidal thoughts. One night he called me in his room and he said, Mom, I don't want to be here. And this boy is always so full of life and always talking about life and he would always say that there's nothing in this world that could get me to not want to be here. I was really taken aback by that because I never ever heard my son spoke this way. One of the things when I looked at him, he was just so wild in his eyes. Like those eyes never lie, I tell you. They never lie. He was just looking very wild in his eyes. And I was like, Jesus, like I called my pastor. I said, you have to pray for him. You have to help me because I knew something was wrong with him, but I just thought it was a completely spiritual. One of the things I worried about is that there was this rumor that his dad had bipolar disorder. And I don't know how true that was. And so I worried that what if this is what is manifesting itself at this age? Every 3 o'clock, this boy would call me, Mommy, Duppy hold me down. Mommy, I see something in my room. Mommy, this, that, that. I would sleep in his room. I don't get any sense of anything in there, but I would still pray. I would pray and I would pray and I would pray. So when he called me and he said that he felt suicidal, you know that I went down on my knees and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed because that's all I know. We don't really believe in therapy. To be honest with you, as much as I would say go get some help, it's not something that we actively practice. And he's also a boy and feels as though when he's out of this mode, he's got it, he's okay. And I let it stay. And I just thought that it was really a spiritual attack that we were going through and a spiritual attack only. Now, one day he was tucked away in his room as he's always tucked away in his room. And I'm tucked away in my room because I'm very concerned with my own life and what's going on with me and wanting to do something with myself at this stage. And so I'm living my life as well in the midst of all of this. And he comes to me and he says, Mom, tears in his eyes, bawling, hollering, Mommy, Mommy, Mommy. I said, what is it? I have something I have to tell you. I have something I have to tell you. I said, what is it now? Because no, I'm really worried because I'm thinking that he got somebody pregnant. And I'm like, I hope it's not that in my mind. And when he opened his mouth and said, Mommy, I've been smoking weed. I was like, what? I honestly expected him to tell me that he got somebody pregnant more so than I expected him to say that he was smoking weed. And that broke my heart because I'm like, were you? And I was lost for words. Because I don't smoke weed. My husband don't smoke weed. My husband don't drink. I would drink occasionally. I don't keep liquor in my house. That is how much I'm not a recreational nothing. The only thing I would say that I'm addicted to probably is trying to succeed at life. And I kid you not. I'm not somebody who overindulge in anything. If one day I get up and I say that I don't want to scroll my phone anymore, I can easily just not scroll my phone anymore. That's my character. That is all my personality is. And so when this little human being that I've raised came to me and said that, Mom, I have a problem. I said, what? And I think that was his rock bottom. I really wanted him, he wanted to share his story, but then he changed his mind. And so I respect that. But I said, so what next? What do I do? What do you do as a parent when your child comes to you and tell you that they have been engaging in something that you know is bad for them and you know is actually having an adverse reaction? They're actually having an adverse reaction to that thing. And I'm like, what do I do next? Do I go get him into rehab? I'm also Jamaican, so we don't do rehab for something like weed, because in my mind, I'm like, it can't be that bad. You smoke a little weed and you're high for a few hours and then you go back to normal. But when this young man came and he talked to me, and it's not that. This young man said that it's really impacting his life to the point where he was seeing things. He was hearing things. He was hearing things like, you're not worth anything. He was hearing things like, you should take your life. He was hearing things. My son under my roof was hearing things because he was indulging in something like weed. And he was ashamed of it and scared to tell me because he knew that that was something that I did not support. Sometimes we have to be careful about how we go across telling our children that we don't support something, right? Because that will prevent them from actually coming to us if they actually indulge and need our help in something with something like that. So I personally saw the signs, but I didn't know what it was. I thought that this anger was because of me. I thought that I was the one who induced this anger on him. I thought that it was a spiritual attack, but it wasn't. This was weed. Weed legalized, selling in stores. You can go in and buy it. You, as a child, they have access to this because my son had several opportunities to smoke before this one. Now, I asked him, when did this happen? And he said to me that, Mom, I never indulged in this before up until the last year of high school. Up until the last year of high school, he said that he was hanging out with some friends. And then one day somebody offered him weed and he just said yes, just like that. He just said yes, he smoked it, and that was it. And then he smoked it again and again and again. And you would be surprised in this society how easily it is for your children to access other drugs. You have to talk to your children. You have to teach them about these things. In a society like Canada, it is more than just the weed that is accessible, because you have children who overdose on other things here in Canada. We don't have that in Jamaica. And when you move here as an immigrant, best believe that that is a genuine concern because your children, your black children, are concerned about integrating into this society. And therefore, when they go around these children, they want to fit in. So you have to have these conversations with your children if you are a Caribbean parent. If you are a parent who has migrated to Canada, you best believe that your children are going to be exposed very easily to drugs. I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. I am telling you because I've lived it. And I've had this conversation with my son several times, and he would tell me all the time how easily, he was telling me all the time how easily it was for him to have smoked. You will have children from grade 6, what we call grade 6, they're in elementary here, they call it elementary. Here, grade 6, they are smoking. They are vaping already. So you best believe that your children can access these things right here much easier than they would in Jamaica. The culture is different, right? The culture is very different when it comes to substance abuse and when it comes to use of substance overall. It is different. And I'm not bashing Canada in no way, shape, or form. I'm merely just stating a reality. So now he told me this, gave me this information, and now I'm scared to leave my daughter with him because now I know he's using. To me, he's using because when I look at this weed here, when I think about the weed here, I don't think about it like the weed in Jamaica. I think about the weed here being very different than what it is in Jamaica. I think about it as being very chemical based. It's not natural and therefore it's dangerous for you. And so I'm scared to leave my daughter with him because I don't know what you're going to do. You're very angry. You're very touch and go. And so I stopped leaving her with him. And, I started following up with him a little bit more. And one day he said that, I'm going to stop smoking. I've stopped. And he would leave his ID with me because he didn't want to walk into the store and buy it because he's still young and they would ask him for identification. And so he would leave his ID with me. And I would take the ID and think to myself that I don't think he's stopped because if you're going into the store long enough, they're going to know you. And I say, he must really have a problem. Guys, I said, it must really have a problem for him to not be able to control it to this extent where you're going to leave your ID with me. One day, I noticed the same anger within him because he had this look in his eyes. Just this look in his eyes and this way that he responds to me very short tempered. One day I remember talking to him and he was crying and he moved from being very angry to very sad to just very emotional that day. And I turned to him and I said, and this was before he told me, I said, are you on something? Are you smoking? So I saw the signs, but I just didn't believe it. And he would always say to me, I'm not smoking. You can always drug test me. You can drug test me. You can drug test me. He would always say that to me. And I think that was his way of, manipulating me. And he would say, you can test me. You can drug test me. You can drug test me. And I never followed up on that because I'm like, I trust my son. I just always thought that this was as a result of me. So one day he said that he had stopped smoking, but he had a friend who smoked. And he went on the road with this friend. And the day after, I was interacting with him and I knew he smoked the night before. I knew it. He was very short tempered, very agitated, wouldn't look me in my eyes, kind of thing. And I said, You're smoking. You're smoking again. And I said to him, You cannot stay in my house if you're going to do that. I'm very sorry. You are 18 now. I need you to leave if you know that you are going to smoke. And this is not me wanting him to leave, guys. This is me not really knowing what to do. I've tried to book an appointment for him to get help. Nothing. At this point, I cannot force this young man to do what I want him to do, right? You have to either want to get help or not. And so I remember him crying that day. I remember him crying and bawling out to God and saying, God, I need you, Lord. I need you. If you really just show up for me. I remember him bawling the day and I remember just ignoring him the day. I remember I ignored him because I was just praying and I was like, I don't know what the hell this is, but God, you have to, I leave it with you. And I remember him, I said, this is his battle that he has to fight because I cannot do this for him. I cannot fight the battles for him. As much as parents, we would love to be able to save our children all the time. I couldn't save him from himself. He had to make the decision to stop smoking. I couldn't beat it out of him, like what we would say in Jamaica. I couldn't drip him up. I could not tell him that he can't go somewhere because he's 18, still living under my roof. The most I had was that he had to leave. That was it. You have to either get some help or leave. And that's the ammunition that I had, and I used it. And so he cried the day, and he cried and he said, Mom, I'm not going to do it. And then when I asked him, he would say that even though I had his ID, he was still smoking. Yeah. Because he could walk into the store and get it because no, they knew him. They knew him. They knew him. They knew him in the store. Imagine living with a stranger. I felt like I was living with a stranger. When your children become strangers like that, what do you do? What do you do? What else can you do but pray? And I said to him, you're going to have to do this one on your own. You're going to have to do this one on your own. I'm here to support you if you need the support, but you have to make the decision to stop smoking on your own. Because at this point, it is affecting his mood a lot. So much so that he is literally depressed and fighting. He's fighting for his life, literally in this moment now. Fighting for his life because it's in his head. It's in his mind. It's in his mind. And so he started going to church, guys. He started going to church. I don't know. One of his friends had invited him to church. And he started going to church. They have a youth service here in Calgary. And he went to church. And he would come and he would tell me that, Mom, I know what you're talking about now. God is real. God is real. Because I've been calling upon God and God has been showing up for me. And he just stopped smoking because he got convicted by God in church. I really wish he was here to tell his story on his own. But I see the change in this young man. Started reading the Bible. Let me tell you something. I couldn't get this boy. I had to force this boy to come to church with me all the time. And he would sit in church and just tap him foot and just not be really present. So when I heard him starting to talk about God and starting to talk about the Bible, and he could tell me about Deuteronomy, and he could tell me about, certain things in the Bible, and I was really proud of him. But it's a battle that I could not have fought for him. I could have fought it with him through Christ, and that's what I did. I prayed for him because I'm always praying for my children. And I prayed specifically about this situation and prayed and prayed and prayed. And to this date, still praying and still worried that he would relapse into something that is unrecognizable. And I still do think that he needs help because I still feel like he's a little bit fragile when it comes to that, because he falls into these depressive episodes very easily, worried a lot about his life and what he's going to do and what's going to come next, when this young man has it really so good. I really do still think that I need to get him assessed, but that's still not even up to me to do. But that is how I found out that my son was in a weed psychosis. This young man thought that I thought that it was a spiritual attack. It presented itself as a spiritual attack. It presented itself like demons in a room. It presented itself that way. And even though I grew up in Jamaica and I have heard many stories about people smoking weed and talking about the green man, I never once connected the dot to that because I didn't see my child as being like any other child. And so if you're a parent watching this, I really want you to see your children, see the good in them, see the bad in them, because those two things can exist at once. Those two things can be true all at once. And so, as a parent, you have to be present with them through every single phase of their lives. I know that it is difficult for you to take care of you and to take care of them and to be their everything where that is concerned. But that's my story. That's my son's story. That's what we experienced with him touching weed. And I really just wanted to spread some awareness about it because I don't think that this is talked about enough in our community, because it has been a drug that is normalized amongst Jamaicans. And even though the weed that we smoke back home could potentially be safer than the one that is distributed here in Canada, a lot of young people that we see, on the streets, smoking weed and drinking a special, it could be the reason why they are like that, the way they are. Lazy, not wanting to work, depressed. A lot of them are depressed. You see them rubbing out them hand middle like that. A lot of them are depressed. And this is what keeps them going in a continuous cycle of puffing and blowing. If you're a parent watching this and you do smoke weed as well, please discourage your children from smoking it, because if they smoke it at an earlier age, they have a greater chance of going into psychosis. They have a greater chance of developing mental illnesses, and they do have a greater chance of not doing anything with their lives. Let's be honest, because you just don't know how your child is going to respond to it. So even though you are a smoking parent, please discourage your children from smoking. If you've made it this far in the video, make sure that you've liked, subscribe, and share the video at the end. Drop a comment down below if you have any topics that you'd like me to explore right here on The Heart of It. I'm your host again, Andrea Thompson, and I'm looking forward to this journey with you. So make sure that you're following along. Bless upon yourself.